Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Now I thought I would put together a little video here prior to the Friday live stream that I would put on the channel on Friday earlier in the day, where I went over some of my thoughts related to this. I actually watched this episode of the Geoff Wilson show. I know Dustin Sports Car Dad has responded to this one, and I'm not sure if other folks have as well. It's one of those things where I don't make a habit out of doing reaction videos to a lot of these podcast episodes, but they are interesting to kind of listen in and kind of see what exactly these folks are working on, especially as pertains to the CardsHQ thing. And that's something we've talked about in the live stream in the past. And it's one of those ones where this one tried to elaborate a little bit more. And, they have the provocative title, Our Secret Business Plan to Generate Millions in Revenue for CardsHQ. So that's obviously a very provocative title. I did listen through it. I listened to it once and it was kind of interesting. And then I thought I would go through it again. And on the second listen through, I really kind of keyed in on a couple of specific things and it took me down the rabbit hole of looking into a few things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of a high level view of this. And then probably during the Friday Live, maybe we'll get everybody else in on it. And I want to get some other thoughts related to it. And if you're checking out this video, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one as well. I will play a couple of clips for it for you, but I will also leave a link in the description to the entire episode if you want to check out the whole thing, because I think that'll give you like a more full context of it. But there were a couple of specific things that when the whole Cards HQ idea came in, and Geoff started with his big grandiose vision, this plan of his for this card shop. A lot of us kind of looked at it and said, okay, well, that's ambitious, and we'll be nice and use the word ambitious. I'm trying to give this a fair shake here as far as kind of thinking my way through it. And in order to do that, I have to listen through a lot of the thought process and the rationalizations and kind of give it an evaluation based on its own merits. Now, in this case, there's a couple of things he said in this one that particularly struck a chord with me. And also, as I said, led me down the rabbit hole. And when I did go down the rabbit hole, I understood a little bit more about, I think, where kind of his vision comes into play. I do think it is looking very much on the optimistic side of things. And I'll kind of go over a couple of specific reasons why. So let me give you kind of the short version of part of this, and then I will play a couple of clips for you. But the short version is one of the big points was more information about what they're talking about as pertains to really focusing in on the live streaming thing. The obvious piece of it is things like box breaks. That's one of those ones that is an obvious, low-hanging fruit kind of in this specific genre. And it's one of those things that you kind of expect from some of these full-service card shops today. Having that card breaking element is a way for them to generate revenue. Card Collector 2 does it, Layton Sports Card does it, a variety of other ones, and other breakers basically specialize in it. But a lot of card shops now have brought the card breaking section into it as another way of generating revenue. It's a way of taking their allocation and clearing through it and generating a profit that way by marking it up, obviously, as you go through these breaks, personal box breaks, or, team breaks or whatever the case may be. And that's the part that we all assumed was going to be part of the design, given the way that they just structured and designed the store when they did all their renders. But one of the other pieces that we were kind of waiting for a little bit more information on, and we speculated a little bit, but we weren't really sure what they were getting at, was the whole idea of the 24/7 live selling. So as I said, this is the YouTube video here, and I'll leave a link in this description. But if you go to the Cards HQ site itself, obviously they bill themselves as the world's local card shop. So that's the branding they're going with. Well, specifically, said wherever you are, we're open to you. That's all fine. But then if you scroll down, live streaming 24/7 worldwide. And that's the part where we kind of started trying to figure out, okay, so what exactly is the thought process behind this? Well, in this particular podcast episode, he does elaborate a little bit, talks about these rigs and things they're trying to figure out and ways that they're trying to incorporate technology to be able to make it possible to stream and show cards on a regular basis. But effectively, one of the key pieces is being able to walk the shop live, as their branding tries to say, involves a little bit of manpower. And there's certain elements of it, and like I said, in a couple of the clips I'll share with you, I think his elaboration of it also kind of leaves me wondering exactly. I understand his optimism, but I think it's a little bit misplaced, especially given some of the obvious points that come into play here. But the key sense that I get is that Geoff really has this grandiose vision that he's hoping will come to pass. He's basically thinking the if we build it, they will come kind of mentality. So getting into that, one of the key points is that he's trying to differentiate himself from a lot of the other retailers by posing the question, and this is what this first clip is going to talk about, posing the question why others don't do this kind of thing that he's proposing about having that 24/7 element and that streaming element and being able to allow people to quote unquote shop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So let me play the first clip here, and then I'll talk through why the obvious of why these stores don't do that.
Why isn't Macy's selling from their aisles? Why isn't Prada selling from their aisles? Why aren't these retailers of all types live in their own stores selling from their aisles to people. They're not.
So the short version of it, to kind of answer Jeff's question, they're not, because it doesn't make sense for them to do that. You know, I had a whole lead in there trying to kind of explain the general thought behind it and the gist of it from what I got from the video and kind of his explanation. And I understood that he was posing this question. And then I'll play a second clip here in a moment where he's comparing it to China and India and some emerging markets where they're doing stuff like this. And actually, like I said, it led me down a rabbit hole. And I'll leave a link to that in the description for you of an article from MSNBC that actually does a really good job of giving a little bit of information about it, and also does a 15-minute video where they do a feature on this and talk about some applications like things like Amazon and also some of these Chinese and Indian platforms that have actually been able to successfully employ this with the whole live streaming shopping thing. So it's one of those things where it is clearly something that has been building, especially internationally. And his mindset is that, you know, that's going to come more into North America and into America itself, which it very well could. But I'll talk at the very end why sports cards might be a weird genre to try to bring that in. I could see it becoming more of a thing, and I'll point to a couple of examples. But at the same time, there's certain specific elements to it that I don't think he's going to have in place to try to do this. It's ambitious, but I don't know if he has the right application to try to do this. So specifically pertaining to his question that he asked, the reason why those retailers don't do that is because, as I said, it doesn't make any sense. And I'll give you an example of something that's outside of it, still kind of retail, but at the same time different. Years ago in the earlier part of my career, I actually worked at a pharmacy, Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada, and what they had a variety of different franchisees, and most of them would close, you know, some of them late, but for the most part, regular hours. But occasionally there were some of the franchises which would actually run a 24-hour pharmacy. Now, again, it's a pharmacy, not a card shop. I understand it's two different industries. I get all that. But there are certain principles here that kind of apply that I think are applicable to what we're talking about here. So when you decide to run any store of this kind, a retail store, a pharmacy, whatever, for 24 hours, there's certain considerations that come into play that wouldn't come into play normally. As soon as you're running into those late hours and into the middle of the night, one of the things you got to understand as part of it is that you're going to run that late night graveyard kind of shift. So the shift that I was operating on when I was working during that time period was 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. So it was a 10-hour shift, 4 days on, 4 days off, which is obviously a very long shift. But it's one of those things where you have certain specific jobs that you're there to do. Now, most of the time I ran in kind of a 3-person crew. And what it really came down to is it came down to somebody would be the shift leader or supervisor, and then the other two would be assigned to different areas and things that they would be working on. And then since it was 24/7 and it was actually open, there would be somebody that would be assigned to focus on cash when that was applicable. And this is important because obviously if you're operating in the middle of the night, there's going to be hours where you're not going to have any customers at all. But it is possible that somebody can come in through the door when they need something. But just because somebody randomly decides they really, really have to have a bag of Tostitos at 3 a.m. doesn't mean that you're going to be sitting there at the cash register twiddling your thumbs until someone shows up. You're going to be stocking shelves, redoing signage, redoing price tags, whatever it is you need to do, or cleaning up aisles, doing whatever you need to do to make sure that the store is in a good state for when the morning shift takes over. So while in the midst of doing all that, you're not near the cash register. So how does that get done? Well, what happens is you also need security. That's one of the other components of it because somebody's got to be kind of manning the front area, especially since everybody else is working towards the middle of the store, the back of the store, maybe going into the back and grabbing more things while all that's happening. And in this case, there's also a pharmacist who's doing their thing, but they're all the way at the back of the pharmacy. So really, you need somebody up at the front kind of keeping an eye out on things. And if a customer happens to come in at whatever random hour of the night it is, then they basically, ping somebody to come over, and then they come up and ring them through the cash register and then send them on their way. And then back to stocking the shelves or doing whatever else you happen to be doing. And that's kind of how you run one of those shifts. Now, again, it's a pharmacy and not a card store. I get that. But the point is, you're basically implying that you're going to need some kind of a skeleton crew to be operating that overnight. Well, the thing about that is as soon as you do that, you're increasing your expenses, you're increasing your costs because you got to pay these people to be there. And how much business they're actually going to be doing is always kind of the question. It's always kind of the challenge. And the thing is, when you're running one of these pharmacies, the reason most of the franchises didn't have 24/7 is twofold. Number one, you needed to have a pharmacist on staff, and most of them don't want to work a graveyard shift. So you had to have one that was A, willing to do that, and B, wanted to do that. And the second part of it was that you also needed a willingness to actually pay a crew, because you could probably get away with doing 2 people if the pharmacy's closed. Because Geoff used a couple of examples of some retailers. One that wasn't included in that clip is that he also talked about Home Depot. Well, Home Depot has overnight associates as well, but Home Depot's closed. So while that's all going on, they're actually stocking shelves and doing all that same type of business, but they're doing it without having to worry about any customers walking through the door. So obviously the considerations are a little bit different. So you can run more of a skeleton crew if you're not worried about the security aspect of it to the same degree, because things get locked. Obviously, you're locked the whole store. And the other piece is that you're basically focused on just doing the task at hand, and you're not having to worry about potentially having to come up to the front and ring through a customer. By not having to worry about that, that requires less people, just naturally. So if you have to also incorporate the fact that you're going to be ringing people through, that's another thing that you have to take into account, is that you're going to need a couple more people in order to make that happen, or at least one more person. Now, bringing it over to CardsHQ, in this case, they're not suggesting that they're going to open the front door in the middle of the night. What they're suggesting is they're going to be virtual. They're going to run a virtual shop, and then I guess allow somebody to go over to a shelf and be able to show things off. I'm not sure exactly how the application is going to be used, but the way he describes it with a rig and the whole thing, that implies that presumably there has to be somebody inside that store in order to do some of these things, and presumably to process an order and take care of some of that business. I guess the question really comes down to if you genuinely believe that this is something that the hobby really needs at these random hours. Now, you can look at the European market. You can say, hey, there could be folks in Europe that might be interested in shopping at those times. That's fair. Or folks over in Asia. Again, same thing, different time zone. So it's something that would make probably a lot more sense. Obviously, when I was working that graveyard shift, I was kind of operating, I always joked, I was operating kind of on Japan time. Because in reality, the hours that I was working, folks were asleep. And then the time that I finally was able to get some sleep, that's usually when folks are, it's the middle of the day. And that's when other folks are doing other things. So you're almost like 12 hours separate from the rest of the world. It's a completely different thing when you're operating those kind of hours. But the main point here is that there's very practical reasons why a lot of these retailers wouldn't do that. One of them is the considerations that I just talked about, the additional costs. The other part is, how much more business are you really going to do that necessitates having people specifically dedicated to that? Because truthfully, the other part that's almost left out of this conversation is that who's stopping you from taking orders? You don't actually need people physically going to look at cards. You can run a virtual store. It's not dissimilar to what happens with Burbank, who's using eBay as a back end in order to purchase items for customers. It's one of those things where if I want to buy cards from Burbank, quote unquote, if they've got it in their eBay store, it could be 3 a.m. and I can fill up my shopping cart full of stuff. Well, nobody's going to respond to me right that moment, but maybe I can make some offers on some cards. And then maybe in the morning or maybe in the afternoon, within a day or so, somebody gets back to me and then we do a little back and forth, come to a price that we agree on. And there you go. It's in my shopping cart. I pay for it and then they process my order. If alternatively, I'm okay with all the prices and I just hit a bunch of buy it nows, well, then it all gets added to my cart. I pay for it. And then in the morning, somebody gets an order and starts fulfilling it. In effect, I was able to order 24 hours, 7 days a week, but it didn't mean that somebody had to be in the store 24 hours and 7 days a week just to make that work. So that's why I find it a little strange, the idea that suddenly you need this in order to make it work. That was kind of the big point that I came across when I was listening to his explanation is, do you really need that? That also kind of leads me to the other part that I question is that even appealing? As a customer, do you feel like you need, that level of interactivity just to buy some cards? Again, for an auction, I kind of get it. For something like a break, where you're maybe interacting with community people and you're interacting with the breaker and you're doing all that, I could totally see that. That's where, the personality, that's where the entertainment value, that's where I could see adding some value. But if I'm just looking to shop for a couple of cards, it's one of those things where if you just made it available in a virtual store, I could just shop at my own leisure, do whatever I want to do, and just add it to my shopping cart and just buy it and pay for it directly. I just don't know if there's additional value to quote unquote having somebody walk over with a rig and show me the cards in the showcase. I guess it might be some value for some, but I just found it very strange that this is an idea. Now, one other point I wanted to make, and I did mention that I went down a rabbit hole. So this is the article I was talking about, and the video on it is the rise of live stream shopping and Amazon Live, TikTok, and YouTube. And I wanted to quickly show you here. I'm actually going to open up a browser window, and I'm actually going to go in to Amazon's Live, and I'll be able to show you here just for a second. So it's amazon.com/live. And here's an example. So right now I just opened it up. I am not even logged in to my Amazon account, but I'm just here. And what happens is right now, as I speak, and I'm recording this late in the evening, right now here is somebody that's actually doing a live stream. And over on the right, you've got the chat window. So that's going on. But the whole time, and this is an important piece, and this is the part where I'm curious if Geoff's got an answer for this. But part of the reason the whole Amazon thing works and the reason they can do a live like this is that, yes, this is live right now in the middle of the night. However, if I am interested, I can be listening to what this person is saying. They can be pitching me on a product, whatever. If I'm interested in the product, right here is a list of products that are associated to it. Now it shows here that this person earns commission. Obviously, that's why they're doing this live stream. But if I look, I can scroll through and I can add any of these items to my shopping cart. And I have Amazon Prime, so then I can have it directly delivered to me. And I've got all that kind of convenience. The friction here is very low. And if I scroll down, maybe I'm not interested in this. This is just the first thing that came up that happens to be live. But if I scroll down, recommended live streams for me, you can go down, upcoming live streams, and you can see if anything else happens to be live, you can check it out. If something's on a replay, you can check that out. And there's a combination of celebrities and influencers and all kinds of different things. Maybe none of this stuff interests you. But the point is, it's pretty easy, ecosystem-wise, to be able to go through things, find what you're looking for, and if they happen to have a product that interests you, you can click on it, and you can still access it down at the bottom panel and be able to add it to your cart. So the friction here is almost nothing. But I didn't necessarily need this live stream, but some people still enjoy it. I could see why there would be some value to it. But the fact that Amazon fulfills it, the fact that it's all taken care of inside of this window, makes it a heck of a lot easier to deal with. I don't know if CardsHQ is proposing something like this. I kind of doubt it. I suspect they're going to be using a couple of existing platforms, maybe Whatnot, maybe eBay Live, something like that. But the friction is going to be there comparatively to something like this, where a lot of this stuff is probably sitting in the Amazon warehouse right now. You could order it and just have it shipped directly to you. It's just easier. Now, this next clip I'm going to play for you is also part of that podcast episode, and it's going to be Geoff pitching his grandiose vision using the China and India example of where he sees that they're growing in this category. And that's why I said that MSNBC article may be useful to you. That video talks about that and how they've been able to turn that into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I can see that for certain types of products, or situations like the example I gave you with Amazon, where the friction level is really low, where you can order the thing right from the app as things are going on. You can click on it, add it to your cart, and then order it. I could see that being a simplicity thing. So I'll leave the clip for Geoff, and then I'll come back and I'll give some final thoughts and kind of why I don't see the sports card side of it necessarily fitting into kind of what his vision is describing. I'm still, by the way, just to be clear, I'm glad he's doing the experiment because I am going to be curious. From a content perspective, I'm interested in commenting on it no matter what happens. And I'm interested in observing like everybody else and seeing what comes of it. But I just don't have the confidence. Like, if I was going to make a wager, I would bet against it. And I'll give kind of my reasons why after I play this clip. So here you go.
They are more so in other countries. And part of the inspiration for this is the success of live selling in countries like China and India, where this is huge. I mean, so much so that there's like in China, they've set up basically kind of entire shopping malls that are virtual shopping malls where the stores in the mall are 100% designed to be live selling live on different apps at nighttime. China, India, some other countries are way beyond where we are in the US with live selling. And I see what they're doing over there. I think Korea is pretty advanced as well. I see what they're doing over there, and I see what is starting to happen over here with apps like Whatnot and Fanatics Live and eBay Live now getting into it, and TikTok shopping, which is huge, going to be massive, growing leaps and bounds. It's starting to hit here. You know, I mean, those apps are creating a market for it, and it's definitely growing. But I think it's still small in its growth curve. And collectibles in many ways is leading the way, which is really cool. Like if you go on an app like Whatnot, they do have sneaker sellers, they do have handbag sellers, they do have makeup sellers, but very few, like compared to sports cards, and TCG, you know, trading card games, tons of sellers of those. So collectibles is kind of leading the way, but I see this spreading across retail to many different categories. And I think that it's not all going to be just about selling in a studio off to the side. You know, I think it's going to be, how do you take the retail store experience and merge the retail store experience with an online live selling experience 24/7? That's what I think the future of retail is in America. And I think in many ways, CardsHQ is the future of retail in America. I think we're going to set a standard. And I know people out there probably think I'm crazy or egotistical for saying that, but I'm telling you, I think we're going to do something really special at CardsHQ that is going to be looked at and studied by people in other industries. And I think you're going to see retail change in America over time. And hopefully we're part of the inspiration for that.
So that's Geoff's grandiose vision where he thinks, they're going to be setting the standard in the North American side of things. And then he thinks that they may become the innovator that makes it applicable to other folks and helps innovate it and really usher it in and expand it in North America. Now, that is a noble and ambitious aim. I'll give him that much. But it's one of those things where I mentioned already that I think for braking, obviously we're already doing a lot of that we've made inroads of it. The whole QVC and home shopping network model has proven that you can do that kind of selling and be successful. And if you have the right personalities and the right presentation and it's entertaining and it's engaging, it's interesting, and the audience checks that out and likes the people that are doing it, I could see them buying products from them. But the problem is you're talking about a lot of volume you're going to need to do. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, the key that I got out of that podcast is that Geoff is envisioning that at some point, maybe not on day one, but down the road, he's hoping that this live streaming and live buying model is going to be the majority of their revenue. He's hoping that it's not going to be people walking in the front door. It's going to be people buying online, potentially from all over the world. The thing is, even though great inroads have been made internationally with a lot of this type of scenario, sports cards don't really lend themselves to this. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't FOMO, because there definitely is. There's a ton of FOMO. But are you going to be able to sustain that level of FOMO? Again, with braking, you can kind of do that because, well, people want to see the packs open. They want to pull the big hit. They want to have that opportunity of playing the lottery, so to speak. But when you're talking about singles, well, you kind of know what it is. It's a single. I'm out there looking for something for my player collection or to build part of my set or whatever. It's a really easy experience. It's a clean experience for me to go to an eBay and just scroll through and find what I'm looking for. I don't really need the background noise of somebody, talking my ear off about this product and trying to sell me on it. Well, honestly, I just need to know if the price is good. I need to know if it's what I'm looking for to fill that piece of my want list. And I just need to know what the price is. That's really what I'm looking at. And I can do that 24/7. I can go to eBay, or I could go to ComC, or even something like Beckett Marketplace. There are a variety of different places that I could go and get a lot of this stuff. Maybe if it's a one-of-one or something like that and you put it in auction format, I could see that being potentially interesting. Then, obviously in that live format. But I would hate the idea that I suddenly have to wait. Potentially there's 50 lots they want to go through and I have to wait for the specific lot. Whereas, like I said, on eBay, it could be a buy it now. It could be a best offer, or it's an auction, but I know when it ends. I can set a snipe, or I can do whatever I need to do in order to try to make sure that I'm able to place my bid. In this other formatting, I'm kind of at the whims of how the host decides to operate the show, or whatever the case is going to be, or if it's something related to trying to buy it directly off a showcase, trying to go through the whole trouble of getting the person, I guess, to show me the card or do all that, when an eBay store and a couple of well done scans would probably suit my purposes just fine. I just don't know if it's specifically solving a problem that I as a consumer have. So I went through a lot there, a little bit of an old school rambling video. So hopefully you kind of got my general gist of it. I went in a couple different directions on it, but I would also be kind of curious what your thoughts are on this. Really, what I'll do is I'll applaud Geoff Wilson and the CardsHQ folks for clearly being very ambitious and having this dream of trying to bring this live streaming format into the card space outside of just the breaking side of it. But I guess I just don't see that they're solving a problem that needs resolution. And I'm interested in seeing how the experiment goes. And I could certainly see this being something that could have some legs early on as the novelty is there. I just don't know if for a lot of the common cards related stuff that's available on eBay or other platforms, I just don't know how much value there is in doing it this way versus just having something like an eBay store and just having something that is accessible 24/7. Do you really need to have folks in the store, manning some kind of a rig to make it easier to facilitate this, when you could just have a staff that's, fulfilling orders? I guess you could have them running a little late, but then they just fulfill online orders. And then in the morning, another crew comes in and takes care of the online orders that came in overnight. I just don't think you need people there 24/7, if that's kind of the idea that they're going with in order to make this vision come true. I guess we'll have to see, but if you're trying to run internationally and trying to cover all the different time zones, I guess there is potential that some of those other markets might be able to fill some of the gap and be able to generate you that revenue and justify the actual staff that you would need in order to make that happen. That's why I gave that pharmacy example. Realistically, if I just go back to that example from the time I lived it, I don't think most of the time there was enough customers during that late hours, especially, to justify having the store open. But it's one of those situations where we did have a pharmacist who was willing to do it. And if somebody needed a prescription or something in the middle of the night, hey, there you go. Or if for some reason you needed those bags of Tostitos, well, we were there. 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, we were there, and you could get your bag and get it rung through, and you were good to go. And that was before the time where you could do the self-checkout. So I don't know, maybe a 24/7, maybe you just have the security guy there, and the self-checkout would be the way that you take care of most of that and let people just stock the shelves the rest of the time. A little bit of a different time. It was years ago now. So anyway, that's just some thoughts that I had high level. I think we're definitely going to talk more on Friday pertaining to that, or on the live stream a little bit, because I'd like to get other people's takes on it, and just curious what the rest of you think. Whether you like Geoff or you don't like Geoff, in a lot of ways, I would encourage it just because I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm glad to see that somebody's trying it. Like I said, I would bet against it. I don't think it's going to work the way he wants it to go work. That doesn't mean the store is going to necessarily fail, but I think at some point he's going to be forced to pivot. My prediction is that he's going to be forced to pivot when he discovers that the appetite might not be there for this specific kind of purchasing, because this particular brand of product, cards, don't necessarily need. You can certainly sell cards. You can try to take advantage of FOMO, but although there's plenty of impulse purchases, we can go to eBay. If for some reason we're insomniacs and we're up in the middle of the night, you can go to eBay and hit some buy it nows and cover your desires without needing a live streaming element to it. But again, that's just kind of my take and my opinion on it. Anyway, that's it for me. More videos coming up on the channel. Live streams on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where we talk about hobby related things and some topics that come up from time to time. With that said, like if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.